The leather of my briefcase feels familiar against my palm as I walk through the marble lobby of my downtown Detroit loft building. My heels click against polished stone, each step echoing the rhythm of another 12-hour day at Miller Canfield. The elevator hums quietly to the 15th floor, where floor-to-ceiling windows frame the city skyline I've grown to love. This space, with its exposed brick walls and original hardwood floors, represents everything I've worked for since graduating from University of Michigan Law. At 28, I'm the youngest associate to handle automotive contracts worth 8 figures, and my annual salary of $142,000 reflects that achievement. Yet as I set my keys on the granite kitchen island, my phone buzzes with a text that makes my stomach tighten. "Camille, baby, can you call me when you get home? It's about your brother Marcus again." My mother's messages always carry this particular weight, a gravity that pulls me back to the 2-bedroom house in East Detroit where I grew up. Have you ever noticed how family emergencies seem to follow a schedule that perfectly aligns with your payday? The pattern started 3 years ago when I landed this position at the firm, though I didn't recognize it then. What began as occasional help with Marcus's car repairs has evolved into a monthly ritual of financial rescue missions that nobody in my family seems to acknowledge as unusual. I pour myself a glass of the Pinot Grigio I keep chilled for exactly these conversations and dial Mom's number. The familiar sound of her television in the background, always tuned to some courtroom show, provides the soundtrack to our discussion. "Camille, honey, I hate to ask, but Marcus is in the emergency room again. Something with his back. You know how he's been since the plant closed. The doctor says they need to run some tests, but our insurance—" Her voice trails off in that practiced way that signals an incoming request. She never asks directly anymore, having learned that guilt works more effectively than explicit demands. Marcus has been temporarily unemployed for 8 months now, ever since the Ford supplier where he worked for 6 years downsized their workforce. At 31, he's 3 years older than me, but seems to have accepted a kind of learned helplessness that makes my chest tight with frustration. During family dinners at Mom's house, he talks about job applications and interviews, but I've noticed the conversations always end the same way. "The economy's just tough right now," he'll say, reaching for another beer while I calculate how much his prescription medications cost monthly and how many of his utility bills have my electronic signature on the payment confirmations. The Detroit skyline glitters through my living room windows as Mom explains the immediate crisis. Emergency room visits without insurance coverage can cost thousands, money that neither she nor Marcus has available. Her Social Security covers her basic expenses barely, and the modest life insurance payout from Dad's death 2 years ago has been steadily depleted by these recurring family emergencies. I find myself opening my banking app while she talks, watching the numbers in my checking account, as if they might provide some new solution to this familiar problem. "How much do you think this will cost?" I ask, though I already know I'll cover whatever amount she mentions. The guilt of saying no to family medical expenses feels impossible to bear, especially when I'm sitting in a luxury loft that costs more per month than my mother's entire household budget. My success as a corporate attorney, with its comfortable salary and annual bonuses, creates an unspoken obligation that weighs heavier than any client contract I've ever negotiated. The admission clerk mentioned it could be around $3,000, maybe more if they need imaging. Mom's voice carries relief, even as she delivers the financial blow. She knows I'll handle this, just like I handled Marcus's car transmission 2 months ago, his dental work in the spring, and the heating system repair that kept their house livable through last winter. My family has developed a collective amnesia about these individual incidents, treating each crisis as isolated rather than recognizing the pattern that has emerged. As I transfer the money through my mobile banking app, watching my carefully maintained emergency fund decrease by another substantial chunk, I wonder when exactly I became the family's unacknowledged insurance policy. The transaction completes with a soft chime, and I text Mom the confirmation number she'll need to give the hospital billing department. Another crisis resolved. Another month where my own financial goals get postponed while I maintain the illusion that this assistance is temporary and extraordinary rather than systematic and expected. The city lights blur slightly as I finish my wine and consider calling my college roommate, Sarah, who moved to Chicago for a consulting job similar in scope to my legal career. She has her own downtown apartment, her own emergency fund, and notably, no family members who treat her success as a shared resource. Sometimes I wonder what it would feel like to earn money that belonged entirely to me, to plan financial goals that wouldn't be derailed by someone else's crisis, to be generous by choice rather than by unspoken obligation. 3 weeks after Marcus's emergency room visit, I'm reviewing automotive merger documents in my corner office when my phone rings with an unknown number. The caller identifies herself as Dr. Patricia Williams from Detroit Medical Center, and my blood immediately runs cold. Miss Davis, I'm calling about your mother, Gloria Davis. She's been admitted for chest pains, and we need to discuss her treatment options and, well, the financial arrangements. My hands shake as I grab my car keys, abandoning the Ford contract worth $12 million that I've been negotiating for 2 months. The drive to the hospital feels surreal, downtown Detroit blurring past my windows as I navigate through afternoon traffic. Mom never mentioned having chest pains, never said anything about feeling unwell during our weekly Sunday dinners. The smell of hospital disinfectant hits me the moment I step through the automatic doors, and I find myself in the familiar position of being the family member who handles the serious conversations. Dr. Williams meets me in the cardiac wing, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the kind of direct manner that tells me she's delivered difficult news many times. Your mother's condition is stable, but we found some irregularities that require further testing. The good news is that this doesn't appear to be an active heart attack, but we need to run a cardiac catheterization to determine if there are any blockages. She pauses, and I know what's coming next. The procedure, along with her overnight stay and monitoring, will cost approximately $8,000. Her Medicare will cover about 60%. $8,000. I do the math automatically, a skill I've developed through months of these conversations. Medicare covers roughly $5,000, leaving $3,000 that someone needs to handle immediately. As Dr. Williams explains the urgency of the procedure, I find myself nodding and reaching for my wallet before she even finishes speaking. The financial coordinator, a tired-looking woman with sympathetic eyes, hands me forms that feel as familiar as client contracts at this point. "Are you the patient's daughter?" she asks, and when I confirm, she continues, "Will you be handling the payment arrangements for the uncovered portion?" The question hangs in the air, and I realize this moment feels different somehow. Not just because of the amount, but because of something in the way she asks, as if she's seen this exact scenario played out countless times before. Daughters covering medical expenses for parents. Children becoming financial guardians without any formal recognition or support. I hand over my credit card. the same American Express that handles my professional expenses and personal luxuries, watching the coordinator process a payment that represents more than most people's monthly rent. The receipt prints with a soft mechanical sound, and I fold it carefully into my wallet next to Marcus's emergency room receipt from 3 weeks ago. A collection that tells the story of my family's medical crises with devastating clarity. While Mom sleeps in her hospital bed, connected to monitors that beep reassuringly, I call Marcus to update him on the situation. His response follows the familiar script: concern, gratitude, and a notable absence of any offer to contribute financially to Mom's care. "Thank God you can handle this," he says, and the phrase hits me like a physical blow. Thank God I can handle this. As if my ability to pay for family emergencies is a blessing bestowed upon all of us rather than a responsibility that has somehow become mine alone. The next morning, during Mom's procedure, I sit in the cardiac waiting room with a cup of terrible coffee and my laptop, trying to catch up on work emails. Between messages about contract deadlines and client meetings, I receive a text from my college friend Jennifer, who lives in Boston and works as a senior consultant at McKinsey. She's excited about closing on her first house, a 3-bedroom colonial in Newton that represents years of careful saving and financial planning. I stare at her photos of hardwood floors and updated kitchens, calculating that the down payment she's made equals roughly what I've spent on family medical expenses in the past 6 months. Dr. Williams emerges from the procedure room with news that Mom's arteries show some narrowing, but nothing requiring immediate surgical intervention. Medication management and lifestyle changes should prevent future cardiac events, she explains, handing me a prescription list that I already know I'll be filling and paying for. The relief of good medical news mingles with the familiar weight of ongoing financial responsibility, creating an emotional cocktail that leaves me exhausted despite the early hour. As I drive Mom home from the hospital, she talks about how grateful she is for my help, how proud Dad would be of how I've turned out, how blessed the family is to have someone who can step up during emergencies. Her words feel warm and loving, but they also crystallize something that's been building in my chest for months. This gratitude, this pride, this blessing. It all centers around my ability to solve problems with money. Not my achievements as an attorney, not my intelligence or work ethic, but my capacity to write checks that make family crises disappear. That evening, as I update my personal budget spreadsheet to account for Mom's medical expenses, I notice a pattern that makes my stomach clench. Over the past year, I've transferred almost $15,000 to cover family emergencies, medical bills, and Marcus's various needs. $15,000 that could have been my own emergency fund, my own house down payment, my own financial security. Instead, it's disappeared into a black hole of family crises that seem to multiply rather than resolve. The breaking point comes on a Tuesday evening in October, exactly 6 weeks after Mom's cardiac procedure. I'm working late at the firm, reviewing a complex acquisition deal for General Motors, when my phone buzzes with a text from Marcus. "Hey sis, can you call me? Got some news about a job opportunity, but there's a situation." The word situation has become family code for Camille needs to open her wallet, and tonight, something inside me rebels against the familiar script. I don't call back immediately. Instead, I finish reviewing the 50-page contract, send my notes to the senior partner, and drive home through Detroit's downtown district, where construction cranes signal the city's ongoing revival. My loft feels particularly quiet tonight, and I pour myself a generous glass of wine before returning Marcus's call. The conversation that follows becomes the catalyst for everything that changes afterward. "Camille, I got offered a position at the new Ford supplier plant in Dearborn," Marcus begins, and for a moment, genuine excitement builds in my chest. Finally, employment. Finally, financial independence. Finally, an end to the monthly crisis calls. The thing is, they want me to start Monday, but I need to get my car fixed first. The transmission is making that noise again, and I can't risk it breaking down during my first week. The familiar sinking feeling returns as he continues. "I know you just helped with Mom's hospital bills, but this is really an investment in my future, you know? Once I'm working steady again, I can start paying you back." The phrase "paying you back" hangs in the air like smoke. In 18 months of family financial emergencies, Marcus has never actually paid me back anything. Not the $200 for his previous car transmission, not the $800 for his dental work, not the $2,500 for various utility bills and rent assistance. The promises to repay have become part of the ritual, like saying grace before a meal, words that make everyone feel better but have no connection to actual outcomes. "How much are we talking about?" I ask, though I'm already mentally calculating how this will affect my own financial goals. I've been saving for a house down payment, dreaming of a place in Birmingham or Royal Oak, where I could have a garden and space for a home office. The market has been competitive, and I've lost 2 bidding wars because I couldn't offer cash beyond the mortgage amount. The shop quoted me $2,800, but that includes a warranty, Marcus explains. "I know it sounds like a lot, but think about it. Once I'm working, you won't have to worry about helping me anymore. This is really the solution to everything." His optimism feels genuine, and part of me wants to believe that this time will be different. But a larger part of me, the part that has been taking detailed notes about family financial patterns, recognizes this conversation as identical to dozens of others. That night, instead of immediately transferring money, I do something I've never done before. I open a spreadsheet and begin documenting every family financial transaction from the past 18 months. Bank transfer records, credit card statements, Venmo payments, even cash I've handed over during Sunday dinners. The numbers that emerge from this analysis hit me like cold water. $23,000. In 18 months, I've given my family $23,000 for various emergencies, repairs, and medical expenses. $23,000 would have been a substantial down payment on a house. $23,000 would have filled my retirement account to the maximum allowable contribution for nearly 2 years. $23,000 represents 4 months of my gross salary. Money I earned through 60-hour work weeks, complex negotiations, and professional skills that took years to develop. Instead of building my own financial security, I've been functioning as an unpaid insurance policy for family members who seem incapable of planning for predictable expenses. The documentation process reveals patterns that make my hands shake with a mixture of anger and recognition. Marcus's emergencies follow a predictable cycle: car trouble every 4 to 6 months, always requiring major repairs that cost between $1,500 and $3,000. Mom's medical expenses aren't actually emergencies either, but predictable costs associated with aging and inadequate insurance coverage. What I've been treating as isolated crises are actually systematic gaps in their financial planning, gaps that I've been filling so consistently that they've stopped seeing them as problems to solve. I call my friend Jennifer in Boston, the one who just bought her house, and find myself crying as I explain the situation. Her response provides the clarity I've been missing. Camille, you're not helping them become more financially responsible. You're enabling them to avoid consequences. Every time you rescue them, you're teaching them that planning is unnecessary because you'll always be there. Her words feel harsh but true, like medicine that tastes terrible but cures the underlying illness. The next morning, I do something that feels revolutionary. I call Marcos back and tell him no. Not, I can't afford it, or maybe next month, but simply no. The silence that follows lasts long enough for me to wonder if the call has dropped. When he finally responds, his voice carries a combination of shock and hurt that makes my chest tight with guilt. But Camille, this is my chance to get back on my feet. I thought you'd want to help me succeed. The conversation that follows becomes a turning point I didn't expect. For the first time, I explain the spreadsheet, the $23,000, the pattern of emergencies that aren't actually emergencies. I tell him about my house hunting dreams, my retirement savings goals, my desire to build a life that belongs to me rather than functioning as the family's financial safety net. Marcus listens quietly, and when I finish, he asks a question that catches me off guard. I didn't realize you were keeping track. Did I really ask for that much money? The confrontation I've been dreading arrives 3 weeks later in the most public way possible. Mom calls me at work on a Friday afternoon, her voice tight with panic. Camille, I'm at the emergency room again. The chest pains came back, and they want to admit me for observation. But there's a problem with the billing department. They're asking questions about the previous visit, and I don't know what to tell them. I arrive at Detroit Medical Center to find Mom sitting in a wheelchair in the billing office, looking smaller and more fragile than I've ever seen her. The financial coordinator, the same woman who processed my payment 6 weeks ago, gestures for me to join their conversation. Ms. Davis, we need to clarify something about your mother's account. Our records show that you personally paid $3,200 for her previous cardiac procedure, but your mother listed herself as the primary responsible party on today's admission forms. The question that follows changes everything. Who is actually responsible for Mrs. Davis's medical expenses? The billing coordinator looks between Mom and me with professional curiosity, clearly accustomed to complex family financial arrangements. But as I open my mouth to once again claim responsibility for someone else's bills, something stops me. Maybe it's the exhaustion of 18 months of financial caregiving, or maybe it's the clarity that comes from documenting $23,000 in family transfers. But instead of answering immediately, I turn to Mom. That's a good question, I say slowly. Mom, who do you think should be responsible for your medical bills? The silence that follows feels dense with years of unspoken assumptions. Mom's eyes widen with something between surprise and hurt, as if I've violated an agreement we never actually made but have both been following religiously. Well, honey, you know my Social Security barely covers my house payment and groceries, Mom says, her voice carrying the practiced helplessness that has become her standard response to financial discussions. And Marcus is still looking for steady work. You're the only one who has the resources to handle these things. The billing coordinator watches this exchange with growing understanding, clearly recognizing a family dynamic she's witnessed countless times. For the first time in our relationship, I respond with complete honesty. Mom, I've paid $23,000 in family expenses over the past 18 months. That money came from my savings, my emergency fund, and my house down payment fund. I've been handling everyone's financial crises while neglecting my own financial goals. The numbers land in the small office like a confession that surprises everyone, including me. The billing coordinator, perhaps sensing the weight of this moment, suggests we take a few minutes to discuss options privately. She leaves Mom and me alone in her office, surrounded by medical billing charts and insurance information pamphlets. The conversation that follows feels like surgery without anesthesia, necessary but excruciating. "I had no idea you were keeping track of the money," Mom says, and her genuinely surprised tone tells me that she really didn't. "I thought you were just helping out when you could, like families do." This response crystallizes something I've been struggling to understand. In Mom's mind, my financial assistance hasn't been sacrificial giving, but natural family support, like sharing holiday meals or birthday cards. "Mom, when was the last time anyone in our family helped me with anything?" I ask. And the question hangs between us like a bridge neither of us wants to cross. When was the last time someone offered to help me move or celebrate a work promotion or support a goal I was trying to achieve? The silence that follows provides the answer we both know but have never acknowledged. Marcus arrives at the hospital 20 minutes later, called by Mom during our private conversation. He finds us still sitting in the billing office, the financial questions still unresolved. The coordinator returns and asks her original question again. "Who will be handling Mrs. Davis's medical expenses for today's visit?" This time, instead of automatically claiming responsibility, I look at both of them and say something that feels revolutionary. "I think that's something the three of us need to figure out together." What follows is the most honest financial conversation our family has ever had. Marcus admits that he's been counting on my financial support so consistently that he stopped planning for his own emergencies. Mom acknowledges that she's been treating my success as a family resource rather than personal achievement. And I explain that continuing to rescue everyone financially has prevented me from building the life I want for myself. The billing coordinator, who has probably witnessed hundreds of these family financial moments, offers a payment plan option that spreads Mom's current bills over 6 months. For the first time, Marcus volunteers to cover half of the monthly payments once he starts his new job, and Mom agrees to contact Medicare about supplemental insurance options that might prevent future large out-of-pocket expenses. As we leave the hospital that evening, something fundamental has shifted in our family dynamic. The automatic assumption that Camille will handle the money problems has been replaced with actual conversation about shared responsibility. Marcus drives Mom home in his still-functioning car, and I drive to my loft alone, carrying a receipt for only the admission copay instead of the entire medical bill. The relief I feel isn't just financial, though avoiding a $4,000 hospital bill certainly helps my budget. The relief comes from finally speaking truth about family patterns that have been draining my resources and preventing me from building my own life. For 18 months, I've been keeping everyone else afloat while slowly drowning myself. And tonight, I finally asked for help instead of just providing it. When I get home, I call Jennifer in Boston and tell her about the hospital confrontation. Her response makes me laugh for the first time in weeks. "It sounds like you finally realize that being the family ATM isn't actually a job requirement." She's right. Somewhere along the way, I had confused love with financial rescue, family loyalty with unlimited financial availability. Tonight, I began learning the difference. 15 months later, I'm standing in the kitchen of my new house in Birmingham, Michigan, arranging fresh tulips in a vase my colleague Sarah sent as a housewarming gift. The morning light streams through windows that belong to me, illuminating hardwood floors I chose and granite countertops I can afford because I stopped funding other people's emergencies. the transformation in my life feels so complete that sometimes I forget how trapped I felt just over a year ago. Marcus has been employed at the Ford supplier for 13 months now, and true to his word after our hospital conversation, he's been making his monthly payments toward Mom's medical bills. More significantly, he started putting money into his own emergency fund, a concept that seemed foreign to him when he was counting on my financial safety net. Last month, when his car needed brake repairs, he handled the $400 expense himself without calling me. The pride in his voice when he mentioned it during our Sunday dinner reminded me why establishing boundaries was an act of love rather than selfishness. Mom's health has stabilized with proper medication management and the supplemental Medicare insurance she enrolled in after our billing office confrontation. She's also started attending a senior financial planning class at the community center, something she never would have considered when she assumed my income would always be available for her emergencies. The class has helped her understand that aging requires financial preparation, not just family members willing to write checks. The house I'm living in now represents everything that became possible when I stopped treating my income as a family resource. The 3-bedroom colonial sits on a quiet street, lined with mature oak trees, and the mortgage payment is actually lower than what I was spending monthly on rent plus family financial assistance. My home office overlooks a back garden where I've planted herbs and vegetables, a luxury that feels profound after years of apartment living funded by income that never quite belonged to me. At work, my success has accelerated since I stopped experiencing the monthly financial stress of family crises. Without the distraction of wondering which family member would need money next, I've been able to focus completely on my legal practice. Last month, the senior partners offered me a promotion to senior associate with a salary increase that will allow me to maximize my retirement contributions and start building the kind of generational wealth I want to create. The most surprising change has been in my family relationships, which have actually improved since I stopped being their automatic financial solution. Our Sunday dinners now include conversations about Marcus's work projects, Mom's community center activities, and my house renovation plans. Instead of being valued primarily for my ability to solve money problems, I'm appreciated for my thoughts, my achievements, and my presence. The shift from being seen as a financial resource to being seen as a person has made family gatherings something I actually look forward to. My friend Jennifer visited from Boston last month, and we spent an evening on my back deck comparing our homeownership experiences. She remarked that I seem lighter somehow, less burdened by invisible responsibilities that had been weighing me down. "You know what's different?" she said, sipping wine as we watched the sunset. "You're living like someone who believes she deserves good things, instead of someone who feels guilty for having them." Her observation hit me with unexpected accuracy. For years, my financial success had felt like a burden rather than an achievement, something that created obligations rather than opportunities. I had been apologizing for my prosperity by sharing it beyond my ability to sustain, treating my career advancement as a family windfall rather than personal accomplishment. Learning to say no to family financial requests had taught me to say yes to my own dreams and goals. The emergency fund I've rebuilt now sits at $15,000, money that belongs entirely to me and serves my own financial security. My retirement account has reached a balance that puts me ahead of most people my age, and I've started investing in index funds that will compound over decades. These numbers represent more than financial health. They represent the security that comes from living within sustainable boundaries. Marcus called me last week to share news that he's been promoted to shift supervisor at the Ford plant, a position that comes with better health insurance and a significant salary increase. During our conversation, he thanked me for forcing our family to confront its financial dysfunction. I never realized how much I was depending on you until I had to depend on myself, he said. I'm a better man now because you stopped enabling me to be a lesser one. Mom's perspective has evolved as well. At our most recent Sunday dinner, she told me that watching me establish boundaries had inspired her to be more independent in other areas of her life. She's joined a book club, started volunteering at the local library, and even began dating a widower she met in her financial planning class. Her life has become fuller and more purposeful since she stopped spending her energy managing crises that she expected me to solve financially. What strikes me most about this transformation is how natural it feels now. The guilt that once consumed me when I imagined saying no to family financial requests has been replaced by confidence in my decisions and pride in my achievements. I understand now that true family love supports each person's growth and independence rather than creating systems of dependence that drain some members to enable others. If you've been carrying financial responsibility for adult family members who seem incapable of planning for predictable expenses, you're not helping them by continuing to rescue them. You're preventing them from developing the skills and independence they need to build sustainable lives. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop solving problems that other people need to learn to solve themselves. When you finally build a life that serves your own dreams and goals, you discover that success feels entirely different when it belongs completely to you.